Hello, everybody. My name is Jelani, and welcome to the 44th episode of the DeSci Rising series, put on by DeSci World, where our goal here is always to provide an opportunity for many of the wonderful projects on our growing DeSci World dashboard to just formally introduce themselves, update their progress, highlight their achievements, and just generally engage with both the DeSci World and the wider DeSci community. And the idea behind all this is always that at DeSci World, we very much believe that more than the tech, more than the funding, it is the community leveraging these tools that are really going to usher in many of the changes that we are all looking for DeSci to bring to the various legacy STEM industries. Now, in today's episode, I have a very big pleasure of speaking with Mike Sin, who is the founder and also software engineer at CureDAO, which is an alliance of nonprofits, governments, businesses, and individuals really entolling that DeSci ethos that are all working together to create a decentralized FDA to discover how millions of factors like food, drugs, and supplements affect human health. And I'm sure this scales to all kinds of biometric data that can come. And so, with all that being said, Mike, thank you for joining us and taking the time today to help us learn more about yourself, as well as a lot of the cool stuff that you guys have built at CureDAO.
Thanks for having us over, and thank you for everything that you do, John. It's you're basically achieving most of the goals that I think we have better than us in terms of kind of coordinating between all of the various DeSci entities that have a lot of overlapping goals and functionality, but probably we're not aware of each other prior to your cataloging of them. So yeah, I'm just very amazed at the great work that you and DeSci World are doing.
I really appreciate that. I think that's a really nice way and concise way of doing it. Like we're really trying to help coordinate these interactions, facilitate, make friends along the way, and help synergize. And let's actually like bootstrap this system and push it forward. So one thing that I did want to add here is again, as per our last time, we really want to make this discourse a lot more pluralistic. So anybody in the audience, and I'm going to remind this periodically as people join, feel free to come up, put in a request. You don't have to wait till the end. If you have questions from Mike or questions about CureDAO or suggestions or creative points, you're more than welcome to come up and let's make this a joint discussion. But so as we wait for, and I see, a few friends in the audience. Rodrigo is here from Reef DAO. They're doing a lot of great stuff involving ecosystem management and regeneration in the Reef. So check out their project. And Rodrigo, I'll be happy to have you up for your own episode once you feel comfortable to do so. But I digress from that. Let's focus on Mike. Let's focus on CureDAO. So Mike, I'd love to kind of get the opportunity to hear what your origin story is. How did you get involved, or how did the idea of CureDAO kind of come about, and where did you start this journey from?
I think me and a lot of other people were recognizing the fact that pretty much everybody wants to minimize suffering in the world. There's about 1 billion people suffering from chronic diseases such as mental illnesses such as Alzheimer's disease and depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and about 1 billion people suffering from autoimmune diseases such as fibromyalgia and multiple sclerosis. And there's what like these 2 billion diseases, chronic illnesses have in common is that they are a function of probably hundreds or thousands of factors in everyday life. And due to the fact that most of these factors are not patentable molecules, there is not adequate monetary incentive to perform the research necessary to quantify the effects of each of these factors on a general level, and especially not in a personalized manner. And there are about, over the last 10 or 15 years since the field of digital health was created, there have been about 300,000 different digital health applications. And we've seen kind of no improvement in lifespan or reduction in the prevalence of these chronic diseases, which is the opposite of what one would expect with such technological advancements. And we think that probably the reason for this is that all of these different entities are many of them are doing basically the same thing, but are creating many different silos of data, which can't really be aggregated in order to calculate, use causal inference and various observational research methodologies to quantify the effects of all of these factors on the severity of these different diseases. So, in order for us to kind of overcome this prisoner's dilemma that kind of prevents these 300,000 data silos or projects from making it easy to share their data and from kind of open sourcing their technology and working in a modular way. The idea was to create kind of use fractionalized ownership and create this decentralized autonomous organization, which would be ownerless or equally owned by all of these different entities, ideally. And then, as well as all of the individuals who would be willing to share their data in order to aggregate it and then create these kind of outcome labels, which that we've made that are kind of similar to nutrition facts labels, except instead of the amount of riboflavin that's in something, they tell you the percent change from baseline in symptom severity for a lot of different outcomes of interest based on above average or below average consumption of different foods, additives, nutritional supplements, drugs, or other interventions. And so we've got um, about 12 million data points, time series data points that we use to analyze using um, this causal inference analysis. There's about, I don't know, I guess, get into more of the details of that later if anybody's interested. But anyway, we use this to create these outcome labels, which still, so we have outcome labels for several thousand different factors and outcomes. But so the data that we have is very broad, but it's very shallow. So, for instance, if you wanted to see the effect of a vitamin B supplement on arthritis severity, there's probably only a couple people that have shared their data on these particular variables. So it's very shallow. So we don't have a lot of statistical power because we have this data silo problem that prevents us from people from being able to easily share their data. So we thought if we could, yeah, create this entity that derived this value and shared ownership, then ideally that could kind of overcome the disincentive for data sharing. I don't know if that's answers your question.
No, that definitely does answer the question. I mean, I think, fundamentally that's one of the major pain points in the world in the traditional infrastructure that DeSci is looking to kind of solve, or at least help solve, is how do you unsilo all of this data in terms of exactly to your point? How can you create a depth of riches, not just a surface area, but a depth of it that can power innovation, that can power actual change instead of just having these fragmented organizations or these fragmented data silos that, yeah, may have some power individually, but if you add those, if you additively add them, or sorry, you add them, would go so much further. And so it's
Indeed.
fantastic. Go ahead.
Yeah, indeed. And the value is more than additive. I think it's multiplicative.
Exactly.
Um, so yeah, I think yeah, we could dramatically. So um, it's been kind of challenging. It's been more of an experiment, and so far, uh, uh, we've been trying pretty hard, but it's quite a challenge, and I think that you're doing making a lot more progress on that than I have so far. But but yeah, and again, it's also still kind of a public good. So if there is some profit to doing this, then somebody probably already would have done it. Um, but it's basically, I think, what the FDA was created to do. Um, but for various reasons, it doesn't seem like they are doing it. But I've met some amazing people within the FDA who kind of want to do this. There's internal bureaucratic roadblocks within various agents. There's another program called All of Us that is being run by the National Institute of Health. They received about $4 billion. That was started by I think Francis Collins, who did the Human Genome Project. But I've talked to like the CEO of that and the CTO, and there's kind of within the government a lot of additional layers of privacy regulations that kind of prevent them from collecting a lot of the very valuable kind of outcome, patient-reported outcome data and factor data that is necessary to use causal inference to kind of quantify and with this longitudinal data what the likely effects of things are. And there's another great guy named Larry Callahan at the FDA who developed their global substance registry database, who's very interested in integrating outcome data with the substance data that they have there. So I'm very optimistic about progress within these agencies, but I just think it'll take some time. Yeah.
So that's actually another really interesting key point, right? I think the flexibility and versatility that comes with the kind of platforms that we're generating are really good in terms of proof of concepts, in terms of helping to expedite policy change, because it de-risks to a certain extent governments. They allow to view this experiment, see what successes and what failures they are, and then it kind of provides them with a good stepping point to say, okay, well, we can actually implement this, and there's value to do so. So I can understand from that perspective that governments would definitely be interested in platforms that are being developed because they're perfect test case. And then you can also, apply plausible deniability and,
Right.
walk away in case it doesn't work. Like, oh, this is just, community led. We don't have to do anything with it. But
Absolutely.
it's great test case. And I think especially for something like this, it's very important. I think the advent of personalized medicine is going to require many more fine-tuned and nuanced biomarkers that are selective to individuals, as well as understanding how these particular, whether it be drugs or therapies or units or whatever, affect an individual on their basis, on their per person basis. So it's fantastic that you guys are building up platforms. I've seen others that are claiming to do so or actively striving to do so. However, I will say that none of them have framed them in such a way as to make it, it's an open source platform that essentially anybody can plug into, is my understanding. But we can go a
Yeah.
little bit more into detail with that actually coming up. But in terms of, kind of want to step back away from that for a second and focus more on the people who would be donating or contributing, really rather, their information. Oftentimes we see issues here because just like industry, individuals also tend to need to be incentivized to do so. And I know that going through your literature, like going through the CureDAO literature, because Mike has very oftentimes said to me that CureDAO is not his; it belongs to the community. And I very much like, if you find a builder in the DeSci space who's like, this is not mine, I have built it for the people, and it is the people's. That's a good first green check. That's a first good green flag to
Or
assume.
or they're ashamed of what they built and they want to blame everybody else.
Hey, listen, take it as you want it, but I take it personally as like, okay, so this is somebody who is mindful of, the people. This is the people's champion, really. This platform is the people's champion. So congratulations, first point on that. But point being, I know CureDAO has somewhat of a flywheel to help incentivize or at least give people ideas or wanting to contribute. Can you talk a little bit more about how the actual CureDAO platform functions internally?
Um, yeah, so are you talking about from like a data donor perspective
Yes, sir.
or from or internal? Okay. So yeah, so if you would like to contribute data and improve the statistical power of the studies and the outcome labels, then you're able to go to our site, and then there's like an app link at the top, and you can sign up there, and then you can go through an onboarding flow and kind of set these kind of reminders for recording your symptom severity if you're experiencing any intermittent either health symptoms or different emotions that like anxiety or um, low mood or something, that you would like to record and see which factors are maybe improving or exacerbating, then it creates these reminders in this daily inbox where you can record their severity, and then also you can add any medications or supplements that you are taking, or common foods that you eat, and those will also be in the daily reminder inbox. It's important that you try to record the symptoms and factors as much as possible, because data missingness is a big problem and it will kind of reduce the reliability and statistical power in the causal inference analysis. So, and then you can also connect to, if you have any other apps that you are using to record these things already, or wearable devices, you can connect those and then automatically import your data. Then all of this is analyzed, and then you can see studies like N of one studies just based on your data, what the typical change from baseline is for you prior to after taking vitamin B supplement, for instance, if you're experimenting with that, or any other supplement you're taking. And then, because there's for instance, in my case, I had arthritis and depression and all kinds of damn diseases for many, many years. And then I uh, went to doctors and was still miserable and took probably dozens of different drugs. But so finally, I just started kind of recording my diet and treatments and symptom severities for 4 months with a bunch of different apps, and then exported it, and then combined it, and then applied this predictive analysis to quantify which factors were most significant. And I discovered that um, gluten intake, for instance, and lectin intake had a negative effect on on all of my symptoms, like about 2 to 3 days after I consumed it, and I would have to stop eating it for about 10 days before the symptoms would subside. And due to these onset delays and long durations of action, and the fact that there's hundreds of different factors, it was impossible for me to intuitively realize that any of these things in my diet had any effect. I was very skeptical of all that stuff before that. But anyway, so I kind of changed my diet, and I felt dramatically better as a result. A lot like my arthritis is much better, and psoriasis is much better, and depression is far better. So, like, after eliminating those, and after like so many years of going to tons of different specialists, not one of them had ever asked me anything about my diet, and that made a bigger impact than any of all these very expensive drugs which I was prescribed. So I think there are probably a lot of people like this who are kind of suffering from these chronic illnesses, who would benefit probably from recording their data for a few months and doing some experimentation, and then trying to identify things that are not uh, appendable molecules, or like a Prozac deficiency or something that might reduce their suffering.
That's very interesting. So essentially, CureDAO functions, and this might be a reductionist approach to it, but as like a medical assistant, your own personal medical assistant, that can at least give you a cursory understanding of certain impacts of, either food, diet. We have a few, even like Elijah here, cannabis intake, and Elijah's from Open Can DAO, previously known as Cannabis Genome DAO. But it allows you to, I guess, assimilate what the impact of these factors are on you,
Indeed.
based off of your biometrics. So that's
Right.
really interesting, right? Um, I guess to
It's
kind of go ahead, Mike, if you want to add something.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Please
No,
continue.
no, please. Okay, cool. So for me, one of the questions that I have is what is that like what is the engine that actually puts forward the data analyses? And how does that where did that come about, or how does that get fed or architect? Is that an AI agent, or what is it?
No, well, it's just a bunch of algorithms that I wrote that are in at GitHub. There's a CureDAO organization and decentralized FDA repository. So I just uh you just wrote a number of algorithms to do this. It's not currently using AI, but we, l- I'm kind of, I also made this kind of text to measurement library that does use AI because it's still kind of it takes me like 5 or 10 minutes a day to record all these things manually in the inbox, but I think it would be preferable. Like I've been trying to record things for my grandmother, but I think it would be there'd be kind of a lower effort bar if we could just talk to this robot and tell it exactly what we ate and what our symptoms were. So we made this text to measurement library that's also in the repository. It's a like a mono repo. So I'm trying currently the project is this big monolith. And I'm trying to, as time permits, like break it up into different modules using this like NX mono repo library framework so that the different components can be reusable in lots of different projects. So one that I just made is this text to measurements engine. And then I'm working on connecting that to this voice recognition module that will make these phone calls and then ask you what your symptoms are today and what treatments you took and what you ate. So I think that will kind of make it easier for people to record frequently and regularly.
That's super cool. So essentially, it cross references FDA reports, or at least FDA data sets on particular assets or particular drugs or whatever, and then records that in context to what you provide as information.
Yes, kind of. Well, most
Okay.
of the information that we have now is like statistical analysis
Yeah.
of the data, the time series data that you provide. And then, so we have data from about 10,000 people. And so you can see these like N of one studies within what, like this app that's like a personal FDA. And then we're aggregating it at the Journal of Citizen Science, which is more of like, I see as a future decentralized FDA. I'm hoping that in the future someday you can go to the FDA website, like you can go to our Journal of Citizen Science and then search for your outcome if you have inflammatory pain or something, and then see a list of the predictors that are most likely to improve or worsen your symptom severity. And then eventually be able to see, we'll have enough data and then characteristics of the data contributors that we can stratify it. So you will be able to just provide your genomic or microbiomic symptomic and other omic profiles, and then it can probably narrow it down and see which treatments may be more effective for you based on your particular strata.
That's super cool. And so what's the turnover? What's the turnaround like? So how soon do I get my report once I either talk to the text or put it in manually through text?
I would say the results are going to suck for a while, like at least a few weeks. Um, and depending on um, depending on the variables and how regularly you record stuff, I'd say you can start having generally more confidence after a couple of months. So there's like a lot of effort required before you get any gratification. It is far from instant. So that is another another problem um, with it. You can try to incentivize people with these tokens and stuff, but that has its own flaws. For instance, it kind of that's going to incentivize bots to put a bunch of fake data in there and then screw up everything. So it's kind of a challenge. Uh, and so at this point, I think the people for who would be most motivated to do it are people that are like suffering a lot and none of the drugs that they've been prescribed has been satisfactory. Uh, in that case, like in my case, so it would be worth it to do the autistic thing and religiously record everything. But probably if you're healthy, you're probably not going to be motivated to provide this high frequency longitudinal data.
Well, you know what? So you call it, I mean, in essence, you're saying that it's a bug or it's a detrimental feature, but in essence, and maybe I didn't catch this originally, but this is how you do your own personal clinical trial. right? Like longitudinal clinical trials. And so I think about platforms, similar platforms where, you can upload your genomics, or you can upload your, your microbe, your exosome, your metagenomics, and it'll spit you out a report on terms of like, okay, well, this is your propensity to be, likely to have this, or this is what you're intolerant to, or this is what you may be intolerant to. But this is actually the pragmatic approach in terms of seeing how that actually is longitudinally. So I ate, gluten, and this is how I'm feeling over the span of 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. That actually refines the statistical power in terms of that report that gets spit out. And I don't think there's any way to actually go around that from a long like there's importance in longitudinal data, right? There's importance in time courses, especially, right? And then eventually we can get into dose curves, but that's how you actually run an experiment. So I think there's a
Indeed.
lot of value in there, right? And I would almost push back in terms of I think part of it is the messaging. Yes, the vast majority of people want instantaneous gratification for whatever they've done, but that also limits the kind of depth that you can get of information on yourself. And so I equate it to, when you, for anybody here who has done some fitness or some, calorie tracking or whatever, like that's a process. There's a whole industry built upon MyFitnessPal, for example, recording your meals daily to look at your calorie intake and all this kind of stuff, writing down recipes. And it's not for everybody, but there is actually a good number of people who do this. And
Indeed.
those might actually be those individuals whom we should tap into, or who should tap into this or market this towards them, being like, hey, listen, you can get additional information beyond just your calorie intake. But what are these different components, and the components in different foods, because they are often tracked with those like the information bars, so you know the ingredients of the foods and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a whole breadth of information that you can get, and these people are already amenable to it. So that might be a really cool thing to plug into.
Indeed. Yes, there's a massive amount of existing data within applications with far better UIs than the ones that we have now. So that, yeah, that's another reason for the decentralized autonomous organization, fractionalized ownership. Ideally, we could persuade all of them to uh, make it easier, include this human like file system SDK thing that I was working on. So we have an API that allows people to utilize all the functionality of the data import or data storage or data analysis within their own applications. So we have an interactive API documentation, or they can run their own instance of the platform. But yeah, so it would be great if MyFitnessPal and a lot of these other apps that already have a ton of data would make it easy to share. And in the past, they were not very amenable to that, because I think it's kind of like part of their revenue model to own this data. But yeah, if we could find some way to incentivize them to do so. Another thing that I've been dreaming of is the creation of some kind of damn robot that lives in your house and follows you around, and that you can just hold the object, whatever you're eating, in front of it, and it will use an image to measurement library to automatically store that data, as well as use like speech analysis to kind of you can there have been a lot of studies showing you can quantify cognitive performance and emotion from frequency analysis of speech, and then ask people questions for any of the other data that could not be captured observationally in that manner. So I think hopefully that will be uh, a reality sooner or later. And then I think that may be valuable in creating a kind of network of uh, collection agents to quantify human health and happiness generally, which could be fed into some kind of autonomous government algorithm that continually refine government policy to maximize the general welfare, which is just human health and happiness. Um, and hopefully we can eventually have kind of some kind of utopia based on that mechanism of action. but
Yeah.
that's my dream.
No, I think that, I mean, a dream is very plausible, right? Especially in today's day and age. If
Yeah,
anybody's ever spent enough time in the food porn section of Instagram or any of these social media platforms, people are taking pictures of their food daily, right? And there's a whole chronicle of, "Oh, I ate this day, I ate this yesterday." And then so just the ability to, like you said, take images and find out the additional info, like the FDA relative information of that food or of those ingredients or whatever, and cross-reference them. That data exists out there. It's just, how do we pull it? How do we get access to that? That's within, like you said, it's within siloed servers. Um, and when you make reference to, kind of an engine, an automation engine where this information is updated to government, a government integrated engine where it helps push forward policies. Like we see that overconsumption of X ingredient or X food source is largely detrimental to the human population that is doing so. For that to be, able to push that, I think would require a certain level of transparency in the government framework, which I don't know if that's uh, within what they want,
right.
but yes, it is something that is very much plausible. But maybe I guess to that particular point, how do we secure, so if I'm putting all this data and eventually if it can scale to something like putting in my genome, my epigenome, my metagenome, my microbiome, security then starts to become more of a concern, right? So I guess on one hand, where is this data stored once I submit it? And you did make reference to people being able to put up their own instance of CureDAO to check for themselves, but in a more grandiose perspective or in a more general perspective, how is this data stored, and also how is privacy? What are some privacy components that are present within this framework?
Yeah, currently it's stored on a HIPAA compliant server on AWS. Um, but I've been experimenting with decentralized storage. There's great solutions like WeaveChain, for instance, that that are good kind of Web3 guardians of off-chain data for tracking and protecting excess usage. But but like it would be cool if you could store it in a secure and decentralized manner. Based on my reading of GDPR, it suggests to me that you have the right to be forgotten, so you have to be able to delete your data, which is not really feasible on IPFS unless you persuade every IPFS node to delete your data. So, but you can. I've encrypted it before at like my own and stored it there. But you could run your own network of nodes that you had control over and then store it in decentralized manner, but it's not really decentralized if you have control over all of the nodes. So I think it's that regulation kind of prohibits uh, self-sovereign data control to some extent. So yeah, currently we just use uh, the standard HIPAA required levels of encryption of data in transit and at rest, and then store it on AWS in a MySQL database there. But um, yeah, so if somebody has some kind of uh, GDPR compliant method of decentralized data storage, that would be cool, especially because my AWS bills are kind of large. Um,
So I think, I mean, this speaks to a slightly greater need for the revamping of policy, right? Like GDPR, HIPAA, and the respective jurisdictional equivalents in other areas were drafted a very long time ago for a very different kind of world. Um, and I think one of the nice things that Web3 and technological advancement does is it pushes the boundaries of these things in such a way as to prompt, hopefully, for, okay, well, how can we revamp and revolutionize and innovate these concepts to actually fit the current world? And let's not try to shoehorn what we're developing, the actual technological innovation, into something that doesn't fit it. So there's a huge conversation that needs to be had and is being had with people like Clinominic and others from LexDAO and even JournalDAO about, okay, well, what is the impact of, yes, what is the impact of policy on Web3, but also what is the impact of Web3 on policy? And how can we change that to make it more, and in this case, help promote biological sovereignty, should that be what people desire? And I think that, you know, potentially not everybody actually desires biological sovereignty, because that's a lot of responsibility over oneself, and a lot of people are not up for that level of responsibility of their own things. But to that point, we also need better user interfaces for that to happen. But
Indeed.
anyway, that's a little bit of an extra point. But I guess we can circle it back to user interfaces. So what does that actually look like for CureDAO? So I'm somebody now who's been CureDAO pilled. I think this is a great initiative, which I personally do. Um,
Thank
how
you.
easy
That makes one of you.
no, you have 10,000 people, so and we're just early, so it's okay. What is that actual user face experience like? Is it easy for me to plug in to quote unquote plug in my smartwatches and biometric sourcing tools? Um, what
Uh,
is that like?
I think it is, but I'm sure you probably get different answers from other people who have tried to use it. But yeah, so yeah, like the daily input of the like patient reported outcomes, I feel like is it takes me like 5 or 10 minutes. But there's plenty of probably better UIs for this with the data sources. You just click the button to connect your account. It's just like an OAuth 2 authorization flow, like whenever you connect your log in with Gmail or anything. Um, so that part is pretty easy, but yeah, there's plenty of room for improvement in the UI, and I think yeah, I think conversational UIs is maybe the future, and um,
That is
yeah, so
absolutely the future of the internet. I think, we'll get to a point where it's like, oh shit, you need to, sorry, I shouldn't be cursing, but you used to have to text to get involved, to interact with this UI, and now you can just talk to it. I think that is definitely where we need to go.
yeah, I think there's much better. There's a lot of projects like Helom and like I don't know, Open Cures and Longevity Planet, um, and there's the what Open Humans. You can that's an awesome open source project, and then I think I'm sure there's a million that I'm missing that are very good as well, in different ways.
So
For Go ahead.
yeah. Well, so my question is, you made reference to emails. So, you can log in and send these an email, and I think that kind of a jump off point from that is, do you need a wallet? Do you need to generate a wallet? Do you need to be Web3 native or Web3
You
initiative?
don't. You can
Okay.
connect your wallet, and we can you can connect your wallet if you want, but yeah, like I said, it seems like uh the the reward system kind of contradicts. I don't know how effective it is at promoting regular input. Aside from, I think it would be very effective at if the tokens were worth anything, promoting robots to regularly input their data. But yeah, so it's like initially, yeah, I had this kind of was thinking Web3 would be a very good solution. Now I'm kind of more skeptical of that. But yeah,
So I definitely want to talk about the token. Um, I will say, with regards to incentive mechanisms, Web3 is pretty good, but we've never seen an instance of Web3 as it relates to the pragmatic world, much like, especially in the context of biomedical and science. And so the jury is still out on what form of incentive mechanisms are best with that. And I think this is all, everything is a grand experiment. So, every try is a success, in my opinion. Um, but
yes,
well, great point, great thing for making it, not strictly web. You don't need to have a wallet, but there is some, I guess, functionality, like say the token, where you would need to generate a wallet. Um, so that's a great first step in terms of adoption. I think the adoption will come as more people become aware of it. 'Cause like I said, there's a whole industry out here of super fanatics and especially now the longevity space and longevity work and people being more mindful in terms of understanding how these foods and how their consumption affects their biology. I think there's a huge source of people who are going to be interested in this. It's just an awareness game, and that's where we come in. um,
Yeah,
but
additionally, there's this, I forgot to mention this digital twin safe that I made, which is a modified version of a Gnosis safe, which you have a DAO, are typically used to hold shared resources, but I kind of modified it so that you can import your data from these various sources and then store it uh, and store it in an encrypted manner in a GDPR non-compliant manner on IPFS, and then use the control of this kind of data gem NFT as an access control condition. So then you could theoretically sell it on a one of these data marketplaces like Ocean Protocol or OpenSea or some other NFT thing if somebody wanted to buy it. Um, so yeah, that's another kind of Web3 component people might be interested in. So that's in our GitHub as well.
that's really cool. I wonder, and this is going to kind of deviate us off for a slight tangent, but I would imagine that in that instance, you wouldn't actually want to sell it, but you would want to license it, right? Because if you sell it, then you also no longer have access to that data, that underlying data. Or am I missing something?
Well, yeah, like so it creates a JSON file that contains all of the data for whatever particular data type you are minting into the data gem NFT. And you could use Molecule. Molecule is like IP NFT contract to I guess it would be your legal property then. Um, and then sell it, but you would still have the underlying data. You would just be like creating a file with all of the measurements that could be sold to pharma or whoever, or marketers or whoever wants to purchase it. And then you would still have a copy of the original data, but if they held the NFT, they would be able to decrypt it and see what was in it. Then I'm not sure what would prevent them from just taking the decrypted data and then using it to make their own data gem NFT and then selling it to somebody else.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So I think there'd probably be a secondary market from that unless there's some kind of legal uh, reason preventing them from doing so and some ability to enforce it because they could also take it and then run it through some kind of synthetic data algorithm that just like changes it a little bit and then it's no longer your data, but it theoretically produces the same analytical results. So it seems like it's going to be a race to the bottom for the price of human generated data. Uh, but maybe I'm wrong. Um,
Yeah.
so
So this is exactly it, right? The issue then becomes how do you like you would need to. Yeah, it'd be a licensing thing. I don't think you could ever sell that data because exactly that, or you can never give up the actual fundamental information in that vault. You either have to have some kind of federated learning process on top of it, where you maintain ownership and sole
yeah,
perspective of the
that
fundamentals.
yeah, that's an excellent use case for Weave Chain.
Exactly. Hey,
Yeah,
huge fan of WeChain.
me too.
I think most of the Web3 DeSci space is running on WeaveChain, so massive infrastructure player in the space and really cool people. Shout out to Omar and his team. You
Yeah,
guys should have met.
he's a super
Great folks. And to the actual point, you know, overlaying things like dynamic NFTs. So those that change based off certain properties might be able to kind of hedge a little bit against that, or like incorporate other features that can then let us, you know, provide more nuance in how we gain access to certain things. So a good example is they've developed these proof of philanthropy NFTs with Lifespan.io, where the more you donate to them or through them, as a matter of fact, they change in features and metadata features. In this case, it's just aesthetic, but you can have actual utility functionality built into that. So, you know, pharma or whomever you sell it to has to continuously pay for it. So it becomes a subscription based NFT. And that powers it up to allow it to give it access to that data in a federated
cool.
way. ideally. But then if they stop paying, then it downgrades the NFT to a base function that doesn't have access. So that's that cool kind of stuff that I think would be interesting to see how it works with, incentive models in Web3, in DeSci, and into the future. But that was me kind of hand waving there and ideating
Wow.
off.
Yeah,
So
that
that's
sounds, yeah, Keith is brilliant. I did not realize
yes.
they would have that functionality.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no, absolutely. So everyone go check it out. So it's built in part by WeChain, so you can already trust at least with that. I highly recommend everyone to check that out. But as we approach the top of the hour, we're about 15, 12 minutes left. This has been a great conversation. I do want to remind everybody that this is an open conversation. So if you would like to come up and ask questions, make commentaries, join the discussion, you are more than welcome to. Just put in a request. I'm going to take a step back and ask a DGen question, if I may. So you made reference to the CureDAO coin. Can we talk about that? What's its functionality in the grand ecosystem, if there is one? And yeah, we'd love to talk more about that.
so initially, we were just using it to track contributions to the project. Um, it and then it has not been incredibly motivating. There's some very altruistic people, um, but yeah. So I don't know. Like every coin feels like a scam to me. I guess it's but not as big of a scam as the US dollar. Uh, but yeah. So it's all I don't know. I guess it encapsulates it's valuable if it can be executed properly in a decentralized way, but many DAOs seem to initially kind of I thought it was they were um, uh, trying to seem decentralized, but were secretly centralized Trojan horses. But I've kind of come to the realization that it's very difficult to get things done in a DAO, and that the startups and companies are more prevalent in the world because they're for a reason. And the DAOs are probably better for things like investment vehicles and shared ownership than actually um, creating products. But I don't know. Yeah, anybody is welcome to make a proposal if they know how to do Web3 and fractionalized ownership. Well, I'd be yeah very grateful for them to join CureDAO and make a proposal and tell us what to do. So I don't know what I'm doing. Um,
So I think two things. So back to just one point that you made there. Two things can be true. You can have the truth of the matter of DAOs are ineffective in a lot of ways, and are effective in also a lot of ways, and we just really need to suss that out. Particularly and I will say this, and I've said this before, DeSci takes the concept of DAOs from DeFi, but DeSci is fundamentally different than DeFi. And so we need to come up with what a DAO actually means and what are the characteristics of a functional DeSci DAO in its particular iterations within our own space. And our space is very broad. We have the funding DAOs, we have the operations, we have the applications, we have the social. All of these things are going to necessitate different forms of what DAOs may be. But that's not to also caution against the Trojan horse aspect of DAOs, where it seems like it's decentralized or at least more equally distributed, but in effectiveness, it's actually not. And so you, as a user coming in as a contributor, need to understand what is the playing ground that you are playing on, and make sure that it aligns with what you're seeking to do. But definitely, there's never going to be an instance of full decentralization in DeSci. It's just not, this industry just would not allow for that. But to echo Mike's point, if there is contributions that you want to give, or that you want to, if there's the way that you want to contribute to CureDAO or any of the other DAOs, please do reach out to them. As you can see again here, Mike is a great person. Um,
so are you?
very kind. I'm just talking about you. You're a great person. The CureDAO platform is fantastic. So jump in, integrate, contribute where you can. And as a perpetual contributor to our spaces, Always appreciated. Love to hear what you have to say, man.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. I come from the regenerative ag community, and for decades they told us it didn't matter what practices we used, how we produced food, that basically broccoli was broccoli, nutrients were nutrients in it. But we questioned that. The research had never really been done that much. And we knew through, doing regenerative practices, in other words, working with the soil biome and the plant biome, and really trying to make those function well, that we increased a lot of taste in them. So we assumed there were some differences. We've all gone to the supermarket and bought that weird looking tomato that didn't taste like anything, and then pulled one out of a garden and it tasted great. And so a few years ago, a farmer and a few other farmers got together and created the Bionutrient Institute. And we've been analyzing. We have farmers send in their produce and their practices and soil samples, and we get that all analyzed for the phytonutrient, phytochemical content. We now have the ability through labs to be able to test a broad spectrum of them for the densities. And our research so far has been shocking, well beyond what we thought the differences might be. And so we now realize that when somebody is told to eat a certain amount of something, that's not, doesn't mean that it's all the same. The group is also working on creating a spectrometer, a handheld, so that people could actually go to a market and shine it on two different carrots. And they're collecting the data now to be able to know what is the spectrum between the best and the worst, and how does that relate with practices. And again, we're finding shocking amounts of the differences. And so I think eventually, we'll be able to tie this in with what was being talked today, could really tie in a lot of important data to really understand, because as I said, we've tested some things. Grapes, I think, were 16 to 1, and a lot of crucial elements that they contain. Many were several to 1. And so it makes a big difference on what you're, which broccoli you're eating. We generally recommend now try to find a regenerative farmer who's really got some good soil health. It's probably going to maximize what you're looking for all the elements that you need, because we realize now it's really a broad spectrum of nutrients that we need, some in very small amounts. But if you're in the chemical production world, you're just not getting those out of your soil. So it really ties together great what I'm hearing today. Thank you.
That's awesome. I'd love to see. I don't know if there's a link in your bio or something. I'd love to see what data the spectrometer is collecting. And so it's quantifying nutrients, or is it just creating and is it like infrared spectrometer or what? Anyway, I can look into those details, but that's another thing that I think the FDA should be doing. And I hopefully you've tried talking to somebody at the FDA. But yeah, there's been a huge increase in the incidence of autism, sleep disorders, since like the 90s, the early 90s, like Alzheimer's disease, suicides, and 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 this is even before like social media and all this stuff. And it correlates very highly with the number of pounds of glyphosate that are being dumped on people's food, which, and we don't, it's been banned in about 24 countries or something, but nobody's collecting this long-term epidemiological outcome data that we could be using for natural experiments to kind of determine if it really is exacerbating these things. There's a bunch of other additives in our food that kind of changed at the same time too. And I've been before started working on this, searching a lot on FDA and CDC websites for this kind of data, trying to identify the effects of these things. But it sounds like your project is making some amazing progress on something that's very important and very understudied. And um, thank you for your great work. And I look forward to learning more.
You can either look up Bionutrient Institute, or in my Twitter profile or X profile, I have a YouTube playlist with everything that we're sort of doing in research in regenerative agriculture. And I'm pretty sure I've got a video in there that explains that, you know, what we're working on. So
That's awesome. Thank you.
I love it. And Ed, I put it up. I put at least one of your profile up on the Jumbotron so people can check it. And there's a YouTube video connected there, which I assume will lead to that, or to lead to the similar videos. So people do check in it. I love this aspect of multidisciplinary composable data sets. And I think this conversation here between Ed and Mike is a perfect example of the richness and the need, more than the richness, the need for these kind of things, because everything is connected. Literally everything is connected. So CureDAO as a platform to understand the impact of these things on human informs what is actually needed in soil samples in the soil biome, as Ed put it, and nutrient profiles of that. It's a full circle ecosystem. And so we need that data. We don't have that data. And then expand that globally. We don't have that data. So that's why DeSci is here. I'd love to see plug-in interoperability and integrations of that with Open Cannabis DAO, with Elijah, with Meso Reef DAO in particular, with Rodrigo, in terms of understanding what is the impact of other aspects on coral reef samples, oceanography, fish consumption, and the nutrient profiles of fish. Like, there's so many things that can compose here. That's what we need in DeSci. We need more composability between the different units. So as I wrap up this space, I'm going to give Mike a chance to close out with any closing statements. But I'd just like to say thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Please reach out to other projects in the space and see how you can integrate with one another, not just from a data management perspective, but in terms of the word is missing. Layering. Let's call it layering, right? Compounding efforts, right? Like in DeFi, where you have compounding yield, I think we can have compounding value by integrating with one another. So that's my last piece here. Mike, any final words and thoughts you want to share with the audience, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Jelani, for everything you do. Thank you, everyone, for joining and all of your great work. And I look forward to learning more about your projects. Yeah. There's a great book called Forces for Good that looks at kind of like the 12 most effective nonprofit organizations, and they're all very different. There's like Habitat for Humanity and the Heritage Institute and a lot of different ones, but they look to see what they all had in common, like the most effective ones. And they all were very good at coordinating between other nonprofits instead of competing with them, and they were very good at working with government and working with other businesses, and then engaging their members. And I think that is like the highest leverage thing that any organization can be doing now. So I think DeSci World is incredibly valuable in that sense, as well as a lot of other organizations that are focusing on that as well. That I don't have time to list, but thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike, for that. We definitely try our best. We wouldn't be doing it without the help of all of you in the space. I think I've made friends with most people here, or at least I consider them friends, and I look forward to working further with you into this future, into the space, expanding the ecosystem. So we want to play with everybody. We want to help everybody grow. Likewise, if you need any help from us, we'd be more than happy to help you. So always feel free to reach out. Everybody who's listening, I'd like to thank you again for tuning in. Go reach out to Mike, go contribute to CureDAO, reach out to Ed, go learn about regenerative agriculture, Elijah, Lunco with Rod, Rodrigo with Meso Reef DAO, and all our other friends in the ecosystem. Go interact with them. Fantastic people, really trying to change the world in their own way, but it comes together to make an actual global and at certain points cosmic scale changes, right? So that being said, guys, thank you for tuning in. I will see you hopefully next week for another episode of DeSci Rising. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you when I see you. Take it easy, guys.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.